The sound of heels on marble echoed through my new office like a countdown timer I'd been waiting to hear for nearly a year. Click, click, click. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind my desk, the city stretched out in a panorama of glass towers and afternoon sunlight. My assistant had just brought in coffee in a real ceramic mug, not the chipped one I'd used for 3 years while building my company in a basement office that smelled like mildew and desperation. The door opened without a knock. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, Vanessa, walked in carrying a manila folder pressed against her designer blazer like a shield. Her expression was that particular mixture of triumph and contempt I'd come to know so well over the past 5 years of marriage. "Nice view," she said, not looking at the skyline but at me, assessing, calculating. I see the little app company finally made something of itself. My name is Julian Cross, 34 years old, founder and former CEO of Streamvault, a data management platform that had just been acquired for $8.3 million by one of the largest tech corporations in the country. Former CEO because the deal closed this morning at 11:42 a.m. I leaned back in my leather chair, one of the few pieces of furniture I'd allowed myself to buy after years of making do, and folded my hands across my stomach. "Vanessa, I wasn't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't." She crossed to my desk with the confidence of someone who thought they held all the cards. "But we need to talk about the future, our future, or rather, the end of it." She dropped the manila folder on my desk with practiced drama. "Divorce papers," she announced. "I'm finally freeing myself from your lack of ambition." The words hung in the air between us. Lack of ambition. The same words she'd used 100 times before, though usually phrased differently, usually crueler. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a single document. I slid it across the polished wood surface toward her. "Before you get too excited," I said, keeping my voice level, neutral, "you should look at the date." She picked up the document with the impatience of someone who thinks they already know how the story ends. I watched her face as she read, watched the confidence drain away like water through a broken dam, watched her skin go from flush to pale in the span of 3 seconds. "This is dated." Her voice came out strangled. "This is from 11 months ago." "Yes," I confirmed. "The same week you called me pathetic. The same week you told your sister I was lucky anyone would put up with me. The same week you said, and I quote, 'You have zero ambition, you're lucky I stay.'" Her hands started to shake. The document trembled between her fingers. "What is this?" "That," I said calmly, "is a post-nuptial agreement. Asset separation. You signed it, Vanessa. Your signature is right there, witnessed by your own lawyer, the one you insisted we hire for our protection." She stared at the paper, her mouth opening and closing without sound. "Everything I built," I continued, "every share of stock, every penny from the acquisition, none of it is marital property. You made very sure of that when you insisted we separate our finances until you proved yourself, as you put it. You just didn't realize I'd use your own paranoia to protect what I was building." The manila folder with her divorce papers lay forgotten on the desk between us. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Not hoping for. I genuinely hoped our marriage would improve, that she'd see me differently, that love might override her obsession with status and wealth. But preparing for? Yes. Absolutely preparing for. Because I'd learned over 5 painful years that Vanessa only loved success. She didn't love the struggle, the journey, or the person doing the work. She loved the destination, the status, the ability to say my husband the way other people say my Mercedes, or my summer home. And now that the destination had arrived, she wanted to collect her prize, not realizing that she'd forfeited her claim long before the finish line came into view. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that hype button to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I love knowing where you're all watching from. I met Vanessa 6 years ago at a networking event for young professionals. I was 28, working as a senior developer at a mid-sized tech company, and beginning to sketch out ideas for my own startup. She was 26, working in marketing for a luxury hotel chain, and stunning in the way that made men stumble over their words. I'd like to say I saw warning signs from the beginning, but I didn't. Or maybe I did and ignored them, blinded by infatuation and the thrill of being chosen by someone who seemed so far out of my league. Our first year together was good. Great, even. She laughed at my jokes, listened to my ideas about the app I wanted to build, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. When I proposed after 18 months, a romantic dinner at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date, She said yes immediately, already planning the wedding before we'd finished dessert. We got married in a ceremony that cost more than I made in 6 months. Vanessa's parents paid for most of it, though they made sure I knew they were paying for it. Her father gave a toast that included the phrase, "We look forward to seeing where Julian's career takes him," with just enough emphasis on seeing to make it clear they had doubts. The cracks started showing about 6 months after the wedding. I'd left my stable job to focus full-time on building Streamvault. I had 6 months of savings, a business plan that 3 different mentors said was solid, and the kind of naive optimism that every entrepreneur needs to take the leap. Vanessa's response, "Are you insane?" We were in our apartment, a decent 2-bedroom in a neighborhood that was more up-and-coming than arrived. I'd just told her about my resignation, expecting surprise maybe, or concern, but also hoping for support. "It's the right time," I explained, showing her the projections, the market research, the letters of intent from potential clients. "I've been building this nights and weekends for 2 years. It's ready for my full attention." "Your little project," she said, the words dripping with dismissal. "Julian, other men our age are already running real businesses. They're making real money. They're not quitting stable jobs to chase some app that probably won't go anywhere." "It's not probably won't go anywhere," I said, trying to stay patient. "I've done the research. There's a genuine market need." "There's always a market need for something," she interrupted. "That doesn't mean you're the one who can fill it. Be realistic. You're a developer. A good one, sure. But running a company? That's different. That takes skills you don't have." I remember standing in our living room, holding my resignation letter, feeling the first cold touch of real doubt. Not doubt in my business plan, but doubt in my marriage. "I need you to believe in me," I said quietly. She sighed, like I was being deliberately difficult. "I'm being realistic, Julian. Someone has to be. If you fail again, and statistics say you probably will, I don't know if I can stay in a marriage where I'm the only one being responsible." "Fail again?" I repeated. "Vanessa, I've never failed at anything. I've never even tried to start a business before." "Exactly," she said. "No track record of success, just optimism and spreadsheets." That was the first time she made me feel small. It wouldn't be the last. Building a startup while your spouse actively undermines you is like trying to run a marathon with someone throwing rocks at your legs. Every small victory was dismissed. Every setback was proof she'd been right all along. When I landed my first client, a small logistics company that needed custom data management, Vanessa's response was, "How much are they paying you?" $35,000 for the year, I told her, proud that someone was willing to pay for what I'd built. 35,000. She repeated it like I'd said 35 cents. "Julian, you were making 75,000 at your old job, plus benefits, plus bonuses. And now you're excited about 35,000? "It's the first client," I explained. "It validates the concept. And I have 3 more in the pipeline." "The pipeline?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you know how many times I've heard about this pipeline? Things are always about to happen. Always right around the corner. Always in the pipeline." I'd been working 16-hour days, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on coffee and determination, and my wife was treating my first real win like it was a participation trophy. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" I asked. "Because I'm tired of being married to potential," she snapped. "I'm married to a man who sits in a basement office working on an app that nobody's heard of, making less than a manager at Target. That's not what I signed up for." "What did you sign up for?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. She didn't answer. Just grabbed her purse and left for her weekly dinner with her friends, the ones who were married to lawyers and finance guys and entrepreneurs who'd already made it. Those dinners were torture for me. I'd hear about them secondhand, usually from Vanessa's sister Marcia, who actually liked me and felt bad about how Vanessa treated me. "She tells them you're her project," Marcia told me once over coffee. "Says she's basically your motivation, that without her pushing you, you'd be content to be a nobody." "Does she actually believe that?" I asked. Marcia looked uncomfortable. "I think she needs to believe it, because otherwise she'd have to admit she's just mean." The insults became routine, background noise in our marriage. "Your little project won't go anywhere. Be grateful anyone puts up with you. My friends' husbands already have second homes. You can barely handle the rent on this apartment. If you fail again, and you will, I'm leaving. I mean it this time." She never came to my product launches. I had 3 of them over the course of 2 years. Small events where I'd demo new features for potential clients, trying to build buzz and credibility. I'd invite her each time, hoping she'd show up, hoping she'd see what I was building and be proud. She came to 0. Her excuse was always the same. "I have plans." Or, that's your thing, not mine. Or once, brutally honest, Julian, I can't watch you pitch to empty rooms. It's too depressing. When investors said I had potential, she rolled her eyes. When tech blogs mentioned Streamvault and roundups of promising new platforms, she scrolled past without comment. When I was featured in a local business magazine's 30 under 35 list, she said, "It's a participation award. Everyone knows those lists mean nothing." Behind closed doors, there was no support, no encouragement, no partnership. There was only contempt, wrapped in the justification that she was being realistic. But in public, with her friends, her family, at parties and social gatherings, she played the role of the supportive wife. She'd smile and say things like, "Julian works so hard," and "We're excited to see where the company goes." It was a performance, and I was the only one who knew it was fake. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in March, 11 months before the acquisition. I'd just come home from a pitch meeting that had gone well. A major potential client, a national retail chain, had expressed serious interest in licensing Streamvault for their distribution centers. It wasn't a done deal yet, but it was the biggest opportunity I'd had in 3 years. I walked into our apartment excited, ready to share the news, maybe even celebrate a little. Vanessa was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine balanced on her knee. "Hey," I said. "You'll never guess what happened today." She didn't look up. The meeting with Harrington Retail. They want to do a pilot program. If it works, and I know it will, we're talking about a contract worth $250,000 over 2 years. "That's nice," she said, still scrolling. Nice. That was it? Nice. I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been bending for years finally reached its breaking point. "Vanessa, did you hear what I just said? $250,000. That would put the company firmly in the black. That would prove everything I've been working for." She finally looked up, and the expression on her face wasn't pride or excitement. It was exhaustion, boredom. "Julian, you've had big opportunities before. The logistics company that was definitely going to expand. The tech consortium that was absolutely going to partner with you. The grant you were guaranteed to get. They always fall through, so forgive me if I don't pop champagne over a maybe. It's not a maybe. This is real. This is happening." She sighed, set down her phone, looked at me with something that might have been pity. "You have zero ambition," she said. "You're lucky I stay." The words hit like a physical blow. "Zero ambition," I repeated slowly. "I've been working 16-hour days for 3 years, building something from nothing. I've sacrificed sleep, salary, stability, all of it, to make this work. And you think I have zero ambition?" "You're not ambitious," she said flatly. "You're desperate. You're clinging to this startup because you don't want to admit it's not working. Real ambition looks different, Julian. It looks like my friend Jessica's husband, who sold his company at 30 and now sits on 3 boards. It looks like Marcia's boyfriend, who runs a hedge fund. It doesn't look like a man in a basement office begging for meetings with middle managers." I stood there in our living room and felt the last remnants of love for this woman crumble into dust. She wasn't wrong that I'd been struggling. She wasn't wrong that success had been slower than I'd hoped, but she was completely, fundamentally wrong about who I was and what I was capable of. And in that moment, I made a decision. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't try to defend myself or change her mind. I just nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. She looked surprised. "Okay? Yeah, okay, I hear you." I went into the bedroom, closed the door, and called my lawyer. Marcus Chen had been my lawyer since I started Streamvault. He'd helped me with incorporation, contracts, IP protection, all the legal infrastructure of building a company. He was also a friend, someone who actually believed in what I was building. I called him at 9 p.m. that Tuesday night. "Julian?" he answered. "Everything okay?" "I need to protect my assets," I said without preamble. "From my wife, before this company succeeds." There was a pause. "You think it's going to succeed?" "I know it is. The Harrington deal is going to close, and once it does, other clients will follow. We'll be profitable within 6 months and acquisition ready within a year. And Marcus, my wife thinks I'm a failure. She's staying married to me out of, I don't even know why anymore. Pity? Stubbornness? But when the money comes, she's going to want half of everything." "She might be entitled to it," Marcus said carefully. "Community property laws." "That's why I'm calling you," I interrupted. "I need to know what I can do, legally, ethically, to make sure that if this marriage ends, when it ends, she doesn't get to cash in on success she never believed in." Another pause. I could hear Marcus thinking. "There are options," he said finally. Post-nuptial agreements, asset separation. It would require her signature, which means she'd need her own lawyer to review. She'll sign it, I said with certainty. How can you be sure? Because, I explained, my wife thinks I'm going to fail. If I present it as protecting her from my failure, from having my business debts potentially affect her credit, her assets, she'll see it as common sense. She'll probably suggest it herself if I plant the seed right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Julian, I need to ask, are you sure about this? Protecting assets in a marriage, even legally, can feel calculated, I finished. Cold? Yeah, it can. But Marcus, I'm not being vindictive. I'm being realistic. For 3 years, she's told me I'd fail. She's undermined me, mocked me, treated me like a burden. If I let the success that's coming become her reward for years of contempt, that's not justice. That's insanity. Okay, Marcus said. Okay, let's talk through the options. We spent the next hour on the phone. He explained the legal mechanisms available. I explained my marriage, my wife's psychology, how I thought she'd respond to different approaches. By the time we hung up, we had a plan. The next morning, over breakfast, or rather, over Vanessa's coffee and my attempt to eat while running through emails, I broached the subject. I've been thinking, I said carefully, about the business, about what happens if things don't work out. She looked up from her phone. You mean when they don't work out? I swallowed the anger her automatic correction triggered. Either way, I realized something. If the company fails, if I end up with business debts, creditors, legal issues, that could affect you, your credit, your assets. We're married, so my financial problems become your financial problems. I watched her face shift as she processed this. The possibility of being dragged down by my failure clearly bothered her. What are you suggesting? She asked. Asset separation, a post-nuptial agreement that makes it clear what's mine and what's yours. If the company goes under, creditors can't touch your income, your savings, anything in your name. You're protected. Is that standard? She asked, suspicious. It's smart, I said. A lot of entrepreneurs do it. Protects the spouse from business risk. My lawyer can draft something if you want to review it with your own attorney. The fact that I was suggesting she get her own lawyer, that I was being transparent about it, seemed to convince her I wasn't trying to trick her. That actually makes sense, she said slowly. I've been worried about exactly that. What if your company fails and suddenly I'm liable for business loans? You won't be, I assured her. Not with this in place. She agreed that same day. Marcus drafted the post-nuptial agreement. It was thorough, separating not just current assets but future acquisitions, business proceeds, investment returns, everything. It specified that Streamvault and any proceeds from its sale, licensing, or operation were my separate property, acquired through my sole efforts, not community property. Vanessa's lawyer reviewed it and advised her to sign. After all, why wouldn't she? It protected her from the debt-ridden failure she was certain was coming. She signed it on a Friday afternoon, barely reading it, annoyed that it was taking time away from her girls' weekend plans. The document was notarized, filed, legally binding, and the date was March 18th, 11 months before the acquisition that would make me a millionaire. The same week she'd called me pathetic. The same week she'd said I had zero ambition. The same week she'd made it clear she was only staying out of stubborn pride. I protected myself not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice, because I'd spent 3 years pouring everything I had into building something real, and I'd be damned if the person who'd done nothing but undermine that effort got to cash in when I succeeded. The Harrington Retail Pilot Program was a massive success. Their distribution centers saw a 23% increase in efficiency using Streamvault's data management system. Inventory errors dropped, processing times improved. Their regional managers were ecstatic. Within 3 months of the pilot ending, we had a full contract. $250,000 over 2 years, exactly as projected. And then the dominoes started falling. Word spread in the industry. Other retail chains called, logistics companies, manufacturing firms. Everyone wanted what Harrington had. Within 6 months, Streamvault went from struggling to sustainable. We hired our first employees, not just contractors, but actual full-time people with salaries and benefits. We moved out of my basement office into a real workspace downtown. We were profitable. Within a year, we were more than profitable. We were growth stage. Investors were calling. Acquisition offers were coming in. And through all of it, Vanessa's attitude remained exactly the same. She didn't congratulate me when we hit profitability. She said, "About time." She didn't celebrate when we hired our first employee. She said, "How much is that costing you?" She didn't ask about the business anymore, didn't care about the wins or the challenges. She'd written me off years ago, and no amount of success was going to make her reassess that judgment. At least, not until the number got big enough. The acquisition offer came from Vertex Solutions, a major tech corporation that wanted to integrate Streamvault's platform into their enterprise suite. They approached us in October, made an initial offer in November, spent December in due diligence, and in January they made their final offer. $8.3 million. I would walk away with $6.8 million after taxes, legal fees, and paying out the small equity stakes I'd given to early employees. Life-changing money, generational wealth. I accepted the deal on a Monday. The paperwork took 2 weeks to finalize. 2 weeks of legal review, document signing, final negotiations, 2 weeks during which I came home every night to a wife who had no idea that her life was about to change, or more accurately, that my life was about to change while hers stayed exactly the same. The deal closed on a Thursday morning at 11:42 a.m. I was in a conference room downtown with Marcus, my accountant, and the acquisition team from Vertex. We signed the final documents, shook hands. They wired the money to the escrow account. It was done. Streamvault no longer belonged to me. But $6.8 million did. I walked out of that conference room feeling lighter than I'd felt in years. Not just because of the money, though that was surreal enough, but because I'd done it. I'd proven every doubter wrong. I'd built something valuable from nothing, through years of grinding work and persistent belief. And I'd done it despite having a spouse who'd given me nothing but contempt. At 12:06 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Where are you? We need to talk tonight." I stared at that message, wondering if she somehow knew, but no, there was no way. The deal hadn't been announced yet. The press release was scheduled for 2 p.m. I texted back, "At work. What's up? Just need to talk. Be home by 7. The press release went out at exactly 2 p.m. Vertex Solutions acquires Streamvault for $8.3 million. It hit the business news sites immediately. Local media picked it up. Tech blogs ran with it. My phone started buzzing with congratulations from friends, colleagues, former investors who'd passed on earlier rounds and were now kicking themselves. At 2:13 p.m., Vanessa texted again. "You sold your company?" "Yes." "For $8 million?" "Yes." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Whatever she was typing, she kept changing her mind about how to phrase it. Finally, "We need to talk. I'm coming to your office." And at 4:50 p.m., she arrived. I'd moved into the new office 3 days earlier, a temporary space that Vertex had provided during the transition period before I officially started as a senior director in their organization. It was several floors up in a downtown high-rise, with that marble-floored entrance and skyline view I mentioned at the beginning of this story. When Vanessa walked in, I was at my desk reviewing the transition plan for my former employees, making sure they were all taken care of in the acquisition. Making sure the people who'd believed in me, actually believed, not just tolerated me, were rewarded for that faith. She closed the door behind her, crossed the room with measured steps, taking in the space, the view, the evidence of success she'd never believed would come. And her face. God, her face was a masterpiece of calculation. The contempt was gone, replaced by something softer, regretful even. But underneath it, I could see the wheels turning, already tallying up numbers, already figuring out her cut. "Julian," she said, and her voice had a warmth I hadn't heard in years. "Congratulations, really. I know you worked hard for this." I leaned back in my chair, watching her perform. "Thank you," I said neutrally. She sat down in one of the chairs across from my desk, crossing her legs, leaning forward slightly, body language that was supposed to convey openness, vulnerability. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about our marriage, and I think maybe we've been fooling ourselves, trying to make something work that isn't working anymore." "Is that right?" I said. Not a question. We're different people than we were when we got married. We want different things. And Julian, you're about to start a new chapter of your life. Major corporate position, financial security. You deserve to do that without, she gestured vaguely, without the complications of a marriage that isn't serving either of us anymore. It was almost impressive, the way she was framing her greed as concern for my well-being. "So, you want a divorce?" I said. "I think we should separate," she said carefully. "Peacefully, like adults. We can figure out the financial details fairly, make sure we're both taken care of while we transition to separate lives." Translation so obvious it barely needed decoding. She thought she was about to cash in on half of $8 million. "You've thought this through," I observed. "I have. And Julian, I think if we're honest with ourselves, you've thought about it too. You've been unhappy for a long time. So have I. This is just the right time to be honest about it. The performance was polished. If I hadn't known her better, if I hadn't spent 3 years watching her dismiss and demean me, I might have actually believed she was being sincere. You're right, I said. I have been unhappy. She looked relieved. Then we agree. We agree that a divorce is necessary, yes? Good. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I actually already spoke to a lawyer. Just preliminary conversations, but I brought papers we can start with. She placed the folder on my desk with a soft thud. Divorce papers. She'd had them drawn up before even talking to me. Had probably called her lawyer the moment she saw the news about the acquisition. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. Instead, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the document I'd been carrying with me every day for the past 2 weeks, ever since the acquisition offer was finalized. I slid it across the desk toward her. Before you get too excited, I said calmly, you should look at the date. Vanessa picked up the document with the confidence of someone who thinks they've already won. I watched her face as she read, watched the exact moment comprehension hit. Her skin went from flush to pale in seconds. Her hands started to tremble. The paper shook between her fingers. This is dated. Her voice came out strangled, disbelieving. This is from 11 months ago. March 18th, I confirmed. The same week you told me I had zero ambition. The same week you said I was lucky you stayed. The same week you called me pathetic over dinner with your sister. She stared at the document, the post-nuptial agreement she'd signed without really reading, the one that separated all our assets and specifically designated Streamvault, and any proceeds from its sale as my separate property. She looked up at me, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out if there was a way out of this. You planned this. You knew the company would sell. No, I said honestly. I hoped it would succeed. I believed it would, but I didn't know. What I did know was that if it succeeded, I wanted to make sure the person who benefited was someone who'd actually supported the work. I supported you, she said, her voice rising. I stayed married to you while you chased this dream. I could have left. You should have left, I said flatly. If I was such a disappointment, such a burden, such an embarrassment, you should have left. But you didn't. You stayed, making sure I knew every day how much you regretted that choice, how much you looked down on me, how pathetic you found my ambition. I didn't. She was scrambling now, trying to rewrite history in real time. Julian, I was scared. Scared you'd fail and we'd lose everything. I was protecting us. You were protecting yourself, I interrupted. And that's fine. You had every right to protect yourself, just like I had every right to protect myself from someone who made it clear they didn't value me. She looked down at the document again, reading more carefully this time, seeing the full extent of what she'd signed away. This says you're not the beneficiary, she whispered, of anything. The business, your accounts, your life insurance. Correct. I removed you from everything the same week, changed my will, updated my trust. You're not listed anywhere. The house is in my name, purchased with money I earned before we married. You remember insisting we keep our finances separate? That was your idea, Vanessa. You wanted to make sure my potential failure didn't affect your credit. She was shaking now, the document trembling in her grip. The cars, mine, both of them. Again, separate property, purchased with funds from my business. Julian, this isn't fair, her voice cracked. We're married. You can't just what? I asked, my voice still level, still calm. Can't protect assets from someone who made it clear they were only staying for the potential payout? Someone who mocked my work, belittled my ambition, refused to support me in any meaningful way? I gave you everything, she shouted. I turned my laptop around, showing her the screen. It displayed a folder I'd been building for months. Screenshots, recordings, saved messages. Her eyes widened as she recognized her own words. Text messages to her friends. Julian's business is such a joke, but when he finally admits defeat, I'll at least get alimony. My friends' husbands are actual successes. I got stuck with a man-child playing entrepreneur. If this doesn't work out, and it won't, I'm leaving, but I'll make sure I'm compensated for these wasted years. Voice recordings from conversations I'd documented, legally in a one-party consent state. You have zero ambition. You're lucky anyone puts up with you. Your little project won't go anywhere. It never does. Be grateful I stay. Most women would have left by now. And browser history I'd accessed from our shared home network, searches she'd done that revealed her true intentions. How much of spouse's business is wife entitled to? Divorce settlement calculator high net worth? Can I claim half of husband's startup? Spousal support for wife of entrepreneur? Her face went from pale to gray. She looked like she might be sick. You recorded me, she whispered. You spied on me. I documented abuse, I corrected. Emotional abuse that you inflicted for years. And I protected myself legally from someone who'd made it clear they were staying married for financial gain, not love. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You can't do this, she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. I'll sue. I'll get a lawyer. There are laws. There are laws, I agreed. And I followed all of them. The post-nuptial agreement is legal and binding. You had independent counsel review it. You signed it voluntarily, and every piece of documentation I showed you was obtained legally. Marcus had made absolutely sure of that. We'd been meticulous, knowing that if Vanessa ever challenged this, we needed to be bulletproof. She grabbed her purse, her divorce papers, backing toward the door. You planned this, she said again, like if she repeated it enough times, it would somehow invalidate everything. You manipulated me. No, I said. I protected myself. After years of you telling me I'd fail, I made sure that if I succeeded, you wouldn't benefit from success you never believed in. That's not manipulation, Vanessa. That's consequences. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see 100 different emotions flash across her face. Anger, disbelief, fear. And finally, the dawning realization that she'd played a game and lost spectacularly. I'll get half anyway, she said, but it sounded hollow. You can't just... The door opened behind her. Marcus stepped in. I'd texted him during the conversation, knowing I'd need legal backup for what came next. Mrs. Cross, he said professionally, I'm Julian's attorney, and I need to inform you that the post-nuptial agreement you signed 11 months ago is legally binding and enforceable. You waived all claims to Julian's business assets, including any proceeds from the sale of Streamvault. In the event of divorce, you're entitled to leave the marriage with the assets you brought into it, which according to our records are a 2015 Hyundai Elantra, currently valued at approximately $4,200, a savings account with a balance of $2,100, and credit card debt totaling $6,800. He handed her a folder, thicker than the one she'd brought, containing copies of every legal document, every signed agreement, every piece of evidence. Your options, Marcus continued, are to proceed with an uncontested divorce, in which case we can finalize this quickly and amicably. Or you can contest it, hire an attorney, and spend tens of thousands of dollars on a legal battle you will lose. The choice is yours. Vanessa looked between us. Me sitting calmly at my desk, Marcus standing professional and unmoved by her distress, and I could see the moment she realized she had no leverage, no options, no way to win. You bastard, she hissed at me. No, I said quietly. I'm the man who spent 3 years building something valuable while you told him he'd fail. I'm the man who offered love and partnership and got contempt in return. I'm the man who protected himself from someone who only saw him as a potential paycheck. But I'm not a bastard for refusing to reward your cruelty. She left without another word, her expensive heels clicking rapidly on the marble as she fled. Vanessa hired an attorney, an expensive one, from a firm that specialized in high-net-worth divorces. I found out through Marcus, who received a call from her lawyer 3 days after the scene in my office. They're going to argue the post-nuptial was signed under duress, Marcus told me over coffee. That you manipulated her into signing by convincing her the business would fail. Can they prove that? I asked. No, because it's not true. You presented her with a legitimate legal option for asset protection, which she agreed to voluntarily. Her lawyer reviewed it. She signed it without coercion. The fact that she didn't bother to read it carefully or consider the implications isn't duress, it's negligence. So what happens now? Marcus smiled grimly. Now we go to court, present our documentation, and watch her case collapse. It won't even make it to trial, Julian. The moment a judge sees that signed agreement and hears testimony about the circumstances, it's over. He was right. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Vanessa's attorney presented their case, arguing that the agreement was unconscionable, that I'd manipulated a vulnerable spouse, that the asset division was grossly unfair. Then Marcus presented our case. He showed the signed post-nuptial agreement with Vanessa's lawyer's signature on the review certification. He showed the timeline, how the agreement was signed 11 months before the acquisition, eliminating any argument that I'd somehow hidden imminent success. He showed documentation of how I'd transparently presented the agreement as protection for both of us from business risks. And then, carefully and professionally, he showed evidence of Vanessa's consistent contempt, her messages about leaving me once she could claim financial compensation, her browser searches about divorce settlements and business asset division. The judge spent about 15 minutes reviewing the materials. Mrs. Cross? the judge said, looking over her reading glasses at Vanessa. Did you have independent legal counsel review this agreement before you signed it? Yes, but did anyone force you to sign it? Threaten you? Coerce you in any way? No, not physically, but did you understand that you were signing a legal document that would affect property division in the event of divorce? Vanessa hesitated. I thought the business would fail. I thought... That's not what I asked, the judge interrupted. Did you understand you were signing a legal document? Yes, Vanessa admitted quietly. Then this agreement is valid and enforceable. Your petition to set it aside is denied. The terms of the post-nuptial agreement will govern the asset division in this divorce. The gavel came down. Case closed. Vanessa's attorney tried to file an appeal, but Marcus assured me it wouldn't go anywhere. The law was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa had signed away her claim to my success the moment she'd decided protecting herself from my failure was more important than supporting my effort. The divorce was finalized 2 months later, uncontested after Vanessa realized there was no path to the money she'd been counting on. She left the marriage with exactly what she'd brought into it, a used car, a small savings account, and credit card debt she'd accumulated buying designer clothes and luxury items to keep up with her friends' lifestyles. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an email. The sender, Vanessa. The subject line, "Can we talk?" I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. Julian, I know I don't have any right to contact you. I know the divorce is final and you've moved on, but I need to try to explain, and I need to ask if there's any way we can talk. In person. Please. I made mistakes. I see that now. I was cruel to you during your startup years, and I justified it by telling myself I was being realistic, that I was protecting myself from disappointment. But the truth is, I was protecting myself from vulnerability, from having to admit that I'd married someone I saw as beneath me, someone whose failure would reflect poorly on me. My therapist says I have deep-seated insecurity about my own worth, and I compensated by tearing down yours. I don't know if that explanation means anything to you, but it's the truth as I understand it now. I'm not asking for money. I know that's what you probably think, but I'm not. I'm asking for a chance to apologize properly. To tell you face-to-face that you deserved better than what I gave you, and that your success, which I never believed in, proves that my judgment was wrong about everything. I'm working 2 jobs now, living with my sister, trying to rebuild a life that I destroyed through my own arrogance and cruelty. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll at least let me say I'm sorry in person. Please consider it. Vanessa, I read the email 3 times. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, that had hoped our marriage could be good, felt sympathy. Felt the pull to respond, to give her the closure or conversation or whatever it was she needed. But the larger part of me, the part that had endured 3 years of contempt and mockery, the part that still remembered every insult and dismissal, that part knew better. I forwarded the email to Marcus. Should I respond? I asked. His reply was immediate. Absolutely not. She's either looking for a way to reopen financial discussions, or she's trying to create a paper trail that shows you have ongoing communication that her next lawyer might use. Don't engage. He was probably right. And even if Vanessa was being sincere, even if she genuinely wanted to apologize, I didn't owe her that opportunity. She'd had years to apologize, years to see me clearly, to value my work, to support my ambition. She'd chosen contempt instead. Now she was dealing with the consequences of that choice. I replied to her email with 5 words. I agree, you did make mistakes, and then I blocked her email address. 6 months after the divorce, I booked a flight to Seattle. Vertex Solutions had offered me a senior director position in their headquarters, overseeing the integration of Streamvault's platform into their enterprise suite. The salary was more than I'd made in 5 years of running my startup. The equity package was generous. The work was interesting. But more than that, it was a fresh start. A new city where nobody knew my history with Vanessa, where I could just be Julian Cross, successful tech professional, without the baggage of a failed marriage following me. I sold the house, the one Vanessa had always criticized for being too small, too outdated, in the wrong neighborhood. Sold it for twice what I'd paid for it, the real estate market having worked in my favor. I sold most of the furniture, keeping only the pieces that mattered, my desk, my books, a few items that held memories of better times. And I got on a plane with 2 suitcases and a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. Seattle was everything I needed it to be. The work at Vertex was challenging and rewarding. The city was beautiful, even in the rain. I bought a condo with a view of Puget Sound, joined a gym, started hiking on weekends. I dated. Casually at first, coffee dates and dinners with women I met through work or mutual friends. Eventually, more seriously, though I was careful, probably more careful than I needed to be, about not repeating the mistakes of my marriage. One woman, Alexis, asked me on our third date why I seemed hesitant to talk about my past. I was married, I told her, for 5 years. It didn't work out. What happened? She asked, not prying, just curious. She didn't believe in me, I said simply. And I learned that you can't build a life with someone who doesn't see your value. Alexis nodded thoughtfully. My ex was like that. Loved what I could do for him, but never loved who I was. It's exhausting. It is, I agreed. Which is why I'm taking my time now, making sure I don't confuse ambition or attraction with actual partnership. Smart, she said. And then, for what it's worth, whatever she didn't believe in, clearly she was wrong. You seem like you've built a pretty good life. I had built a good life, and the best part was that I'd built it despite Vanessa, not because of her. Despite the contempt and mockery. Despite the constant message that I wasn't enough, would never be enough. I'd proven her wrong in every way that mattered. 2 years after moving to Seattle, I was sitting in a coffee shop near my office when I got a notification on LinkedIn. Vanessa had viewed my profile. I clicked through to see what she'd been up to. She was working in marketing again for a small regional firm, back in the same industry she'd been in when we met. Her profile made no mention of her brief marriage to an entrepreneur. No mention of me at all. I wondered what she thought, looking at my profile, seeing the senior director title at a major tech corporation, seeing the articles I'd been quoted in, the panels I'd spoken on, the success that had come after she'd left. Did she regret it? Probably. Did she understand why I'd protected myself? I doubted it. People like Vanessa rarely see themselves clearly. They rationalize, they justify, they convince themselves that they were reasonable and everyone else was unreasonable. I closed the notification without responding to it. Because the truth was, Vanessa was a chapter in my life that was completely closed, not with bitterness or anger, but with the finality of a lesson learned and integrated. I'd learned that love without respect is worthless. I'd learned that support means nothing if it only comes after success is guaranteed. I'd learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary, especially when dealing with someone who's made it clear they don't value you. And I'd learned that the best revenge isn't hurting someone back. It's building a life so good that their absence from it feels like the gift it actually was. 3 years after the divorce, I married Alexis. Small ceremony, close friends, no drama. She'd met me after I'd already made it, so she never had the chance to doubt me the way Vanessa had. But more importantly, when I told her about Streamvault's story, about the years of struggle, she said something that stuck with me. I wish I'd known you then. I would have believed in you. And I believed her. We bought a house together, had 2 kids, built a life that was grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of partnership I'd once thought was impossible. Occasionally, people who knew me back then would ask about Vanessa, about the divorce, about how it all went down. I kept the story simple. We wanted different things. She didn't believe in what I was building, so I protected myself, and when the company succeeded, she didn't benefit from success she never supported. It was the right decision for both of us. Most people nodded, understanding. Some people looked uncomfortable, thinking I'd been too harsh, too calculating. But Marcus, who'd been my lawyer and friend through all of it, told me once over drinks, "You did what you had to do, and honestly, you taught me something. Sometimes the most important contract isn't the one you sign with investors or clients. It's the one you make with yourself, to never let someone else's lack of vision limit what you build." He was right. I'd built something valuable despite Vanessa's contempt. I'd protected that value from someone who'd only wanted it after it was guaranteed, and I'd moved on to build a life that was so much better than anything I'd had before. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my back deck, watching my kids play in the yard, with Alexis reading beside me and the Seattle skyline visible in the distance, I think about that moment in my office 2 years ago. Vanessa dropping her divorce papers on my desk, me sliding that post-nuptial agreement toward her, her face draining of color as she realized she'd signed away her claim to my success the moment she decided I wasn't worth believing in. It was a calculated move. A cold move, some might say, but it was the right move, because I didn't owe her half of what I'd built. I'd offered her partnership. I'd offered her the chance to be part of the journey, to share in both the struggle and the success. She'd chosen contempt instead. And when you choose contempt over partnership, when you choose mockery over support, when you stay married not out of love but out of calculated self-interest, you don't get to cash in when the person you dismissed finally proves you wrong. You get to watch from the sidelines. And that's exactly where Vanessa was now, on the sidelines of a life she could have been part of if she'd just believed in me when it mattered. But she didn't, so I protected myself, and I built something better, and I never looked back. The end. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that hype button. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone who didn't believe in you? I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.